Welcome to the working world. I'm Karen Mendez.
And I'm Jamie Lingham.
Jamie, we just had the pleasure of speaking with Jenni Hurst, the principal from Dovetailer, which is a home search and relocation service that many organisations use. And we just spoke to her about the very pressing issue of accommodation, short-term, long-term, cost, and all the pain points that come with it.
Karen, I agree. It was a great call. Best backdrop we've had for the whole series of the working world.
Agree.
Jenny had going on, which was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
A scratchy call in relation to the technology. There's a few delays, but the message was fantastic. I think that what really struck me is that, obviously with the accommodation shortage that's happening, I think not only Australia but around the world, really talks to how practitioners could be or companies could be working with providers a lot better. I thought Jenny had some great ideas and just seemed very progressive. And I think that, it's always refreshing talking to a supplier who doesn't want you to spend the maximum money that you're prepared to spend, actually saying, hey, you don't need to spend that. That always takes me a bit by surprise. But I think it's a refreshing and really nice thing, to be doing. So, yeah, I think...
Absolutely.
Yeah, great show.
Yeah, absolutely. Her message was clear in relation to a call for innovation and to work smarter, not only around what we as corporates offer, but also how we partner with our service partners, just broadly speaking, but specifically in relation to home find in this topic. So yeah, great visual watch, great audio watch, and enjoy the episode, guys.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Jenny. How are you? Welcome to the working world. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm very well. It's really nice to be here.
And nice with your beautiful black backdrop. It's one of the best we've seen, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Jenny, we want to dive into accommodation.
Well, that's good. Bring some colour into the picture.
Exactly, particularly for this conversation. We wanted to chat to you today about accommodation and particularly the cost of accommodation for many mobility program owners and the businesses that they support. And I wanted to talk to you about this particular pain point where, I guess there's a lot of macro conditions outside of corporate's control that is feeding into this. And I wondered if you, being in the industry and close to the products, you'd be able to provide us with an overview of what's driving up the cost for the background of those who aren't familiar.
I think there's a number of things. Look, especially in Victoria with the increase in land tax that is obviously being passed on to those properties that are for rent. So that is an issue. I think there's an absolute issue just purely out of supply and demand. And I also think that household size has decreased. And so there's not as much sharing going on because we're working from home. And let's say 2 or 3 days, perhaps we're working from home and people need that space to do exactly what we're doing on a Zoom call, or they need quiet. It can't be a chaotic household. And I think these things have really influenced the price of accommodation. And it doesn't seem to be going down anytime soon. And people, and what we're paying for is probably not really value for money, but people are just continually putting these prices up. And unfortunately, people keep paying for it.
I mean, what sort of trends are you seeing as far as companies? What was their reactions to it? I mean, are they moving people further out? Are they looking for different accommodation? I mean, how is this changing what you do from a day-to-day basis?
Look, I think if you're dealing with an international person coming into Australia, I think they're genuinely surprised at how expensive it is in the major cities. And let's just talk major cities. They sort of think that they're coming and they'll be spending, under $1,000, let's say, for a 3 or 4 bedroom home, maybe even with a swimming pool, because we're in Australia, it's hot and they think that they can have that. That is not the case. If you want that, you can have it, but you're definitely going to be outside that lovely 5-kilometre radius of being close to the city and having that city provide what you want to enjoy in a city. So that's one thing. I think It depends if the company is paying for the accommodation. Not normally the case, only temporary accommodation, which they'll pay for, 1 month or 6 weeks. But generally speaking, a company won't pay for that, 12 to 24 months of accommodation. So it's the individual, and that's a big chunk of money, $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a week out of your pay packet, unless, you're getting paid a small fortune. But a lot of people coming are sort of that middle management, and that's a lot, that's a big percentage of your wage.
Is that being, sorry, Karen, just to jump in.
No, you're fine.
Another question, but is that communicated in the recruitment stage at all? Are you aware of that, that it is being communicated? Because I can imagine, as you said, people coming across to Australia would have an expectation that they're going to have, sort of big houses and pools and it's pretty affordable. So I'd imagine that there'd be a bit of disappointment happening, or a bit of, that shock, as you said, happening when people turn up and it's not what they expected.
Look, I think that I mean, I can't speak for all companies, of course, and each company does it their own way. But very often when, say, let's say my company's employed to relocate a person, that they don't have that information. And I think that, COVID has been a major disruptor to our industry as a whole. But I also think it's provided, incredible opportunities for us to really look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, and perhaps alter that to the advantage of the person who is relocating. I think we can do a much better job. And I think there are so many opportunities for us to improve the way things are done.
Jamie, I might have a question for you on this. I mean, we talked about bringing people into Australia as obviously contributing to that. Are the immigration stats numbers, is there an influx? Is this, one of the key causes perhaps behind the shortage? I guess I'm talking more at a housing shortage level rather than just simply temporary accommodation. But is the immigration numbers supporting or driving up this trend as well?
Yeah, look, I think that they're definitely looking to cut the program to relieve pressure on the housing and accommodation industries. So, but it has to. I think that people coming through, and I think to Jenni's point, people working from home and doing all that. It's just interesting to see sort of where it goes. And the land, all those things that Jenni sort of said. But definitely, I think immigration has to be contributing. We still need people. Sorry, Jenni, I'll let you keep talking on the reload.
Yeah, no. It's good to
look, I definitely think that's, that is part of it. There's still, we're at 4% unemployment, and, you're not going to suddenly find skilled and experienced people just because you turn the immigration tap off. I think the opposite will happen. Wages will go up, prices will go up, inflation will increase. Delays will occur on getting products and services because there's not the availability of local workers, or any workers for that matter.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. Yes, Jenni, back to you, our guest. The revenue side of organisations, the revenue side of organisations are focusing, as I said, on that cost of mobility more and more, and they're looking for, I guess, alternative solutions, particularly to the most expensive line item, which is the temporary accommodation. So as you pointed out, it's usually 4 or 6 weeks, depending on the organisation. I guess, do you have any suggestions you could share around some cost-effective alternative approaches that organisations could perhaps take, bucking the trend, I guess, around that traditional 28 days, 4 weeks, 6 weeks offering? Is there anything that program owners could consider that they haven't before?
Yeah, look, I think there's an opportunity here, and a lot of people, we're offering this in our service, but we are able to find people homes before they arrive. So my last 3 clients, we've found them a home, they've signed a lease, and we've got, the facilities that we have at the moment with WhatsApp, with FaceTime. Old school, take a video and post it to them because of different time changes if you're dealing with New York or London or something like that. We can show people what they're walking into in a home, and we can facilitate a move so that once they arrive at the airport, you can pick them up and literally take them to their house. I mean, I think there's a huge savings in, 1 month of temporary accommodation in, rental, like temporary housing. And I think this also folds back into things like, from an environmental perspective as well. If you can, there's furnished houses where I'm finding a big demand currently. We want a furnished house because the cost of shipping is ridiculous due to the issues in the Red Sea. So currently, you roughly thought it would be about a 3-month process to ship your goods from one country to another. It's now more like 6 months. Now, that's a long time, and it's pretty much double the cost, roughly speaking. Okay, what can we do about that? Well, first of all, we can hire a long time of rental furniture that you can do. And the rental furniture companies provide great solutions. The beds are pretty much new. It's not like, like their offering is actually very good. Fully furnished homes. Yes, it's not your furniture. Yes, it's not personal, but you can, it's a very good solution for 1 or 2 or 3 years if you're returning to, going back to the state that you originally came from or the country that you originally came from. If you're moving here for good, then, we look at other ways or other solutions, and perhaps you do ship all your furniture. But I think there's some, currently, I think there's some really good options where we can, not have to necessarily outlay those huge sums on temporary accommodation.
I'm just curious, and I just think about how you said, things have changed and you can get people to sort of turn up into accommodation rather than having to drive them around in different suburbs. Do you see any trends where employers will actually say, hey, we'll get you into a place, get a longer rental, and we'll contribute a small portion for a longer period? So, rather than saying I'll do this 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, premium cost, premium product, I'll say, well, listen, I'll give you X $100 a week towards your rental area, which you're probably going to move into, and maybe just sort of soften that blow for a bit longer. I don't know if it's evolved to that level.
It's something that we absolutely suggest. I'm like, if a company can actually, let's say a week's temporary accommodation is, can be anything from, let's say, $2,000 to $5,000. So that's a big chunk, but that is, that's, probably, 4 to 6 to 8 weeks rental, depending on what type of rental you have. So wouldn't it be more cost effective from a business perspective to pay for someone's long-term accommodation, for 3 months, rather than just outlay a cost which is of benefit to the person in relocating, but actually it's more of a benefit to them if you're saving them, 3 months rent instead of just having a month of temporary accommodation. I would have thought that's a much, much better use of company money. And I think overall, it's a way better business decision, and it's far more responsible, really. And it's beneficial to the employees. So they go, unreal, this is great. I've got a real bonus. And I mean, everyone's winning, I would have thought.
Yeah. No, it sounds, I mean, in my head, it feels a lot easier. And as you said, all that technology you have available to you, it sort of makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, and it's a good suggestion, Jenny, in the fact that it's probably a better use of the individual's time, or avoiding a clash of the individual's time once they land in country, right? Because they're hitting the ground running, they're starting their role, they're trying to get in the headspace of onboarding, and they're being dragged around, looking at houses, signing leases. So I imagine your goal is to try and get all of that done before they've even departed to some degree, so that when they hit the ground running, they truly hit the ground running from a personal and a role perspective. I guess that kind of makes me think about the other side of the coin here, which is that longer term housing availability. So putting aside the temporary accommodation for 4 or 6 weeks, that rental market issue that's obviously feeding into those higher costs in temporary accommodation. Is there anything that mobility practitioners should be doing around ensuring either that extension to that temporary housing scenario where the scope creeps from 4 to 6 to 8 to 12 weeks because there's no stock? And is there anything that they can be doing to ensure that the individual is supported better around that more permanent housing transition?
Look, I think, I mean, in fairness, it's unusual that, let's say there's a month temporary accommodation. It's very unusual that we wouldn't be able to meet that person's needs. There would be a property that we could find. In this environment, though, it's people are getting rejected just because instead of 3 or 4 people competing for that home, there's sometimes 30 or 40 people. And I mean, that sounds like a big jump, but that is the reality out there. I take people, and it is good to take clients to home opens because they can, they think, oh, there couldn't be, 100 people. Well, there are 100 people because there is just the rule of thumb is, and I think for most relocation agents, I think the rule of thumb is you're not going to show anyone something that you personally wouldn't live in. And we be that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedroom homes, whatever. I'm not going to show someone something that, has got mold on the ceiling, but a lot of these homes currently do. It's actually really bad. And so what's happening is, and I'm sure, most people wouldn't realize this, but what's happening is people, so let's say we've agreed, the agent and the owner of the property have agreed it's $500 a week. But people are offering $510, $520, $530, $550, which is fair and reasonable as long as that information is provided to all of the applicants. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where it doesn't have to be provided to all the applicants. So let's say I've got a client, they might be happy to pay $550 for this property, but as far as we're concerned, it was advertised at $500. So our application's gone in saying, yes, we'd like to move in next week, and we're prepared to pay $500 a week, which is the asking price. And the real estate agent should be saying, our job is to find the best tenant, not necessarily the highest price. But by law, if someone offers the highest price, you actually have to disclose that to the owner of the property. So depending on the owner of the property, I mean, if someone's offering you an extra, probably 90% of people will take that option as opposed to a better tenant. So, and that's fine to do that as long as we've all got the information, but we don't. And so there's this, I don't think currently it's a very fair system. I mean, the other option that we can advise people to do is, provide perhaps 3 or 6 months rent up front, which will often secure a property, because depending on people's tax structures and how that's sort of situated for each individual, that can sometimes be a bonus. It's like, oh, great, I've got 6 months rent up front. That's excellent. So that's another option. And I think also having all your paperwork in place. So having digital copies of passports and driver's license and letters of employment, so that process, you're not chasing your tail. And also what we're finding now is that you apply for a property prior to you having seen that property. And that's a bonus. So all your paperwork's there, ready to go. If you like the property, it's like, great, my application's in and I'm done. You're not waiting, oh gosh, I've got to get that organised. Oh yeah, I forgot to send it. I'll send it tomorrow. The property's already gone. In this market, the property's gone by then because someone's already jumped the gun. And it's not that you're a bad tenant or all your dots weren't, all your things weren't lined up, but you've just missed the opportunity because you weren't prepared ahead of time. So I think preparation is key in this current environment for sure.
Jenni, I wasn't prepared for you to say that there's 100 people that apply for a property. It just seems insane. But it sort of got me to thinking, obviously, what you do and what mobility practitioners do is not just about international moves, it's about interstate moves and, but looking at the overseas foreign nationals, I'm just wondering if that adds a layer of complexity in helping them secure a house, because someone turns up on a temporary visa, there's a property owner, I go, well, hang on, I've got, Joe Bloggs who's moved from Sydney and they've got a solid job and they've got a couple of kids and whatever, they know what they're coming to. Or I've got, the next person who's coming from overseas and I'm a bit unsure about their visa status and a bit unsure about everything else. Do you find that that's coming into play at the moment?
It is coming into play a little bit, yeah, or it can come into play a little bit. But I think majority of people relocating, generally speaking, have got a letter of employment from their employer. So as long as that's in place, I mean, there's little things like, oh, well, we don't have an Australian bank statement. Well, no, of course you don't. They've been in the country for a week, but you can get around that. And I think the other benefit, that, like, to be honest, we're all looking at the same properties on realestate.com or domain.com. So it used to be that, let's say, a relocation agent such as myself would have a bit of an advantage because we would talk to people, you'd be on the ground and you can offer things that maybe we're not seeing online. But we're all looking, technology is so good these days, we're looking at exactly the same things. But what it does give you the advantage of is if I go and view a house on behalf of my client, or I'm with them on that, on the inspection day, I know that probably 99% of the time, they will always be in the top 3 or 5 applicants, however many the agent puts forward. They will always be in that top 3. Once it gets to the owner, we don't have control over that, unfortunately, unless we know the owner, which is highly unlikely. But I know for a fact that because all the checks and balances have been done by either the company or by myself prior to them applying for a house, they know that our candidates are going to be great tenants.
Mm. That almost bidding war environment that you were talking about a moment ago, Jenny, around people offering, 5, 10, 20, 550, and that level of transparency not necessarily existing within the current process. Is that what they put in place in New South Wales recently? Or did they remove it in New South Wales recently? I thought New South Wales was a little bit more progressive around this and put some rules in place to avoid it.
Interesting that you say that. I researched it the other day and I haven't got to the bottom of it. But I think I know I rang the ACCC about it probably 3 or 4 months ago. And I just said, look, this is not a fair environment. What can you do about this? Their response was, it's competitive and that's just the nature of competition in the market. And I said, well, it is competitive as long as the information is available to everyone. But currently it's not. So maybe it has altered in New South Wales. Okay. Yeah, you could be right. I'm not across it, so I can't really comment.
But it's certainly not it's obviously not the case in Victoria from what you're 100%. Describing. Yeah. Okay.
No, so absolutely.
Some other states perhaps could take some leaves out of that suggestion. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And then I guess, you were talking about your services. I always thought, yes, relocation agents had this little black book with some secret listings of properties that none of ourselves had. But yeah, I agree with you. Technology has got to a stage where the playing field is a lot more level. But I guess as far as your services go around home finding, they've, in my experience anyway, there's always traditionally been those services are often either given to or taken up by more senior members of the organisation who look to relocate. And with, I guess, the current challenges in the housing market, are you seeing organisations offer or a greater uptick in the demand for home search services from, I'm not going to say lower levels, but other parts of the organisation, not necessarily just for the senior members? And is it meeting the needs of those new cohorts?
It's a good question. To be really honest, I actually think the number of hours or days or time that, across the board that's being allocated has actually decreased. So it used to be pretty much a standard, let's say, 3 days. And now what we're seeing is, like 8 hours, 16 hours. And look, to be honest, I feel like, well, the company should actually just keep their money. Like, I don't think that's of benefit, really. And I think what really should be asked are 3 things. How well do you know the city you're going to? What's your budget? And what's your circumstance? Are you single? Are you a couple? Are you a family? But those questions are not really often asked. It's a package. So as I said, it's an 8-hour, it's a 16-hour, it's a 24, 36, whatever, 48-hour package.
Yeah.
So, 1, 2, 3, or 4 days, let's say. And that's the standard package. But that is very much, we're all individuals. So, the three of us might have 3 children, but we're going to want to live in different suburbs. We've all got a different budget. We might want private schools, we might want public schools, but we're not really delving into what does that individual need. And I think that's how we need to change our industry. Let's go back and ask these questions, because the end result is a much happier employee. They actually feel like they've been listened to and that their needs have been met. And it's like very unusual that it wouldn't be a successful move. And I think if we can, involve the relocation agent into that, we can have a 45, anyone at any company, if you're talking to a person that actually does this and goes out and, can talk to an employee for, half an hour, 45 minutes, will know 3 or 4 suburbs, even if they've never been to Australia, let's say, will know, and any city will know 3 or 4 suburbs where they're going to find their tribe, let's say. And that's critical. Like if you want them to be happy and successful, you want to be in a place where you're happy, where, you've got similar people, you're close to the beach, or you're close to parks, or you want to be near the city, or, in a sort of world where there's restaurants and pubs and whatever, if that's your thing. But if you don't ask those questions, whether you're giving them 8, 16, 24, 48 hours, it's just not going to work just because that's the package. Like it's great to have a package, and I fully understand why you offer a package, but isn't it more critical to ask the person what they need so that it's tailored to the individual or the family or the couple or whatever it might be? I think that's a more valuable and realistic way of having successful relocations.
So, Jenni, you've mentioned throughout this whole our time together just a bit about how things are different since COVID and how things have evolved. And obviously the last comment you just made in relation to, I suppose, the old traditional model of 8, 16, 24-hour blocks. Have you got any thoughts as to where you think the industry should be evolving to? So for the Karens of the world who have done this for a long time, mobility practitioners who have actually been there, then they've sort of got that traditional model going. It feels like to me as an outsider from the relocation space that in your head at least it's evolved. And so if it's evolved, what does that new sort of, I suppose, chapter or that new evolution of relocation look like?
And Jamie has a great knack for just taking the next question I was going to ask and rephrasing it. Thank you, Jamie.
Sorry,
there you go, Jenni. No,
okay.
cool. There you go. There's 2 questions in one for you there, Jenni.
Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
That's all right.
I think we've got into very much offering packages, and I think we need to sort of take a step back and offer, it can still be a package, you can call it whatever you want, but let's tailor it. Why can't we tailor it to an individual and deliver what they need, not necessarily what they want? Because everyone wants everything. That's not necessary. But to tailor a package to that individual, like we've just had, conferences after conference saying, oh, if you could change the whole environment, what would you have, and what would be the most valuable thing that you could do for your employees? It's like having this little individual who takes care of everything that person could want or require. Well, the truth is you do have that in your relocation agent. Whatever service you use, whatever, be it Server, be it Santa Fe, be it, Dovetailer, be it whoever you're using, the individuals who actually relocate these people provide that. They can provide all of that, but I don't think that they are necessarily utilised. And I think why not use that service? And because they can tailor it specifically to their needs way before they even arrive here. We can have that conversation as soon as they sign their contract, which might be, 6 months while we're waiting to process visas and all those things. Realistically, the process for anyone takes somewhere between 3 months on a good week, but 6 to 9 months, generally speaking, from from inception to completion. It's a good 6 to 9 months realistically. So we can have those conversations right at the beginning, and we can give you a very accurate number of hours or days, however you need to look at it from a company perspective. It can be pretty accurate, rather than just a formula because you're at a particular level in a company. Like a CEO gets the most because they're the CEO, where the junior manager gets the least because they're a junior manager. Well, often the junior manager requires more because they're competing. They're working on a $6,000 to $1,000 budget a week. So they're competing with, 30, 50, 100 people when they apply for a property. But if you're paying $2,500 a week as a CEO, let's say, then you're really only down to 5% of people who are applying for that property anyway. So they actually need literally half the amount of hours that they're allocated. As a business, you're paying for 50 hours when really you probably only need 25 for the CEO. Like, it is crazy, but I think there's an opportunity to tailor it and cut costs.
Yes.
Always good to tell people they don't need to spend the money that they're spending.
Exactly.
Well, that's exactly right. And the truth is, if we can't add value, then there's no point having us. So use what we've got and what we can offer, and we can add. There's a lot of value there that I think is being really underutilized.
And it's an interesting point you make around personalizing it, because everything else in our lives now is personalized to the nth degree with our own personal devices. And it seems like we're actually taking the opposite direction, particularly for these services. You're right, they're becoming more scalable as opposed to personalized. Certainly in my observations anyway. So yes, I can understand where you're coming from, Jenni. Absolutely. And thank you, Jenni, for asking the question. And thank you, Jenni, for explaining for the mobility practitioners of the world what that actually means.
It just goes to show that great minds think alike.
Exactly. We've been together too
long. But also, as Jenni said, if people have been, sort of tossing this up around previously and in conferences, we're not the originators of this question, but obviously it is a question in the market. So it's really interesting. I think that the whole evolution of where it's come from to where it's evolving. I really like a lot of the stuff you said, Jenni. I think telling people that don't need to spend money is fantastic, particularly as a service provider. And they're like, hang on, what? You're trying not to spend as much money with you. And I think that builds, people talk of integrity selling, but they don't necessarily practice it. And I think that coming there with actual proactive tools to save money on what they could be spending with or what they're happy to spend with you, I think that's refreshing, and it's I'm sure it's doing you really well in the industry, Jenni.
Well, it's trying to change something, and I think if we can do it better, why wouldn't we? Why don't we?
Yeah, agree.
And if we're adding value, as long as we're adding value, doesn't matter where you are in the equation. If you can't add value to any business, then don't use us. But I think we bring a lot of value. So hopefully we can utilize it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And I think also if this can encourage people who are working with providers, whether they're locked in or not, that it will encourage them to go out and have those questions of their current providers and say, how can we work better? Because it's got to be an industry conversation as well, right? We've got to be constantly improving. The world's changed. The whole way you deliver things have changed. So I think this has been really good. I've certainly made a few notes. And the big one for me was actually encouraging clients to have the conversation with individuals before they come across on a visa, just as to what the cost of living will be, because I think that can, really sour what should be a very positive experience for a new job in a new country, only to turn out and to say, hang on a second, if I'm got to pay overseas school fees at state schools, or I've got to pay more for what I'm planning on, it puts a lot of pressure and really sort of sours the experience.
Absolutely.
No, that's all right. Sorry, I was just going to say, the aim is to make it as seamless as possible, and you can do that as long as you ask the right questions.
Yeah,
that's right.
Love it. Great. Okay.
Thank you, thank you, Jamie, for your questions, and thank you, Jenni, for your insights into this industry, the constraints we're all working under at the moment, and particularly pushing for that innovation, because this industry, rather, I should say, it does need to continue to evolve, and we need to do that in all facets of mobility and relocation. So thank you for bringing your thought leadership to the working world today. It was lovely to talk to you, and we wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jenni.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks, Jenni.